can't see it, my screen, I have a slide deck. You see it? Thank you for letting me know. About our international field trips. I am going to cover both CMS approved and private trips. If you would like to access this, there's two places it can be found. I have the entirety of this slide deck on the international field trip folder that's online accessible, that's public facing, but I also have a bit.ly at the top corner of my screen as well. This isn't all of the information I'm going to share with you today, but this is in a nutshell a lot of the information you should know and some changes that I've made over the summer to increase the safety of our trips. At any moment you have questions, please don't hesitate to unmute yourself. I will try to keep an eye on the chat, but there might be times where maybe I don't see your question. So if I'm not getting to that fast enough for you, just feel free to unmute. So what we're going to cover today are all the opportunities you have to take your students on international field trips through CMS. First, we're going to talk about approved trips. There are two types of trips you can take. You can take a CMS approved trip. And what this means that this is vetted, endorsed, approved by Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools in our district. It allows it really is meant to be for this field trip to be an extension of the classroom, which is really our objective with all our field trips. Let me see, I believe we still have some people coming in.
Our custodians will
all right, and please don't forget to mute yourselves as you come in, since we are recording. So it's an extension of a classroom. We're meant to make sure we follow our North Carolina Standard Course of Studies as we go through these trips and make sure that the kids are still continuing their learning, but in a much wonderful setting so that we could really expose them to the world, opportunities they might not have in our classroom alone. And it also, any of these criteria that you see on the screen makes it an approved trip. If you're using a vendor through CMS, we have contracts with vendors, and that would make it a CMS trip. We have to make sure we have all that paperwork in place. If you are using resources for the school, this is the one I always like to highlight. If it's a CMS approved trip, you're able to use your CMS email. You're able to meet in the building. You're able to do fundraisers. If the PTA wants to sponsor your trip, all those things can be done if it is a CMS approved trip, not private. CMS students can also, and teachers, have excused absences, so it can happen during the school year. The performance area used to be learning community. They'll review the dates to see if it's a good time of the year. Obviously, I wouldn't go during testing, but there are opportunities where you can miss some school time. The other thing I want to highlight is the SFELD-R is our school board policy here in CMS that guides you through all field trips. This is both domestic and international. I strongly recommend that you read this very thoroughly because it goes through all the criteria, chaperone criteria, things for you to know as a trip leader, safety precaution and protocols, things that families should know on international field trips. So please take the time, if you're planning on going a trip, to read this very carefully before you make decisions on what kind of trip you want to take. So this is an overview of the process. So the way it first begins is if you're wanting to take a trip with your students, whether it's you teach Spanish and you want to teach your Spanish students, sometimes art teachers want to take advantage and take their students, whatever it is the situation, if you see that it aligns with your curriculum, the first step is always to talk about your plans with your principal. If and of course, at that moment, you might not have everything planned perfectly, but you should be able to walk into the office and explain to him or her who you're wanting to take, what is the objective of the trip, about how long and what dates you're having in mind, who you're wanting to maybe take with you, if there are chaperones or staff members that you want to take. So all those basic informations, and of course, it'll be all tentative at that time to make sure your principal supports you in that decision. If you get the initial approval from the principal, then the next step would be to, and again, this is for approved trips, not private. This would be, then you would enter it into EdJourney. Once it's an Ed Journey, it will notify the principal, your learning community, now known as performance area communities, and myself that you have entered the trip. And again, when you edit and enter an Ed Journey, you have to put those details, the date, where you're planning on going, the time frame. And so that is found on the intranet under web applications. Once you put it into Ed Journey, please reach out to me for a full orientation. This is a Cliff Notes version of my orientation, but I will meet with you. I can come out to your school. I can set up a Teams meeting, whatever's more convenient for you, to really walk through all the details and process so that you have all the support you need to get started. Once you have met with me, we'll go over all the paperwork, lots of forms, contracts. If you're partnering with schools, a memorandum of understanding, a written document talking about what everybody's responsibilities are. All that paperwork needs to be done. Once that is finished, and again, throughout the process, I'm here to support you. Once the paperwork is done, the trip leader will submit it again to the principal to a final review so he or she can see the plans. And once the principal sees the paperwork, then it will be sent over to the performance area to review so that the performance area superintendent has time to see all the forms, give approval or ask questions and clarity if they need it. And then the next and final phase is when it goes from your performance area to the superintendent designee. That designee right now is Mr. Jaron Carson, one of our chief officers. It will be changing soon, but there will always be a superintendent designee who will give the final approval. So that's 3 approvals: principal, your area superintendent, and the superintendent designee. And throughout all the process, I collaborate with your performance area, with the superintendent designee. If they have any questions, they will also email and reach out to you if they need to find some clarity or have questions about your trip. And once everything is finalized and signed, I will email you letting you know it has received full approval from all 3 designated parties. And at that point, you can then start signing families up and collecting money, and not before that point. So that's something that I always like to emphasize. Now, you can gauge for interest. It's step 1. After you talk to your principal and he or she says, yes, go for it, start planning, you can start asking families if they're interested, because I do not want you to have to go through all of these steps of preparation if you find out no one's going to sign up for your trip. Okay, but that's different than signing a family up and collecting money. Gauging interest is just genuinely asking some families, we're thinking about going to Spain next year in the summertime. Is that something you and your family would be interested in? Yes or no? It could be a survey, it could be an email. If it's a private trip, if you know it's private, I would not use your email. You have to use your personal email. So just be careful. Remember, we're going over the approved process only, not private. I'm going to pause just to see if there are any questions before I move on. Let me look at the chat to see if I've missed anything. The bit.ly has to request access. I am so sorry. Let me fix that for you right now. I can't believe I made a rookie mistake. Okay, here we go. I forgot. There we go. Now you should be able to access it. If you cannot, please let me know. I apologize for that. Let me see if there are any other questions. Okay, nothing right now. Please unmute yourself if something happens. What is the bit.ly? Okay, it's right here, bit.ly/IFT August 2024. Let me put this bit.ly in the chat. Sorry, my computer's working a little slow. And that way you have it in the chat as well, okay? All right. Darian. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. I have made some changes, okay? For those of you who don't know me, I have only been a global studies specialist for, I think, 7 or 8 months now. So I am very green in my role, but I have I've done a lot to try to learn as quickly as I can because the safety and protection of you and your students is my utmost priority. Second, and a very close second, is this wonderful experience for kids because I grew up being able to have this opportunity through my school, both in high school and college. And I'm a very big believer in the importance and value of this. But my role right now is both compliance and safety to make sure nothing, and we plan for everything. Okay. So our checklist looks a little bit different. I tried to streamline it a little bit. Some of the forms I noticed were asking for the same information. So I'm really wanting the teachers to facilitate that for you guys. So the form looks a little bit different, but the criteria, everything is similar except for the following. Please notice that everything says draft. The reason why it says draft is because we still need final cabinet approval. Both Dr. Hill and Dr. Medlock are reviewing this now. I have gotten the okay from the Chief Officer Jaron Carson. So we are moving forward because trips are still being planned. So we still need to go ahead and plan and do this process. But until the cabinet completely formally approves it, I do need to keep the word draft. So the moment you see draft gone, you will know that Dr. Hill has given her seal of approval. But these are the changes that I've made so far. One is that if you are partnering with a school, for example, a lot of our dual language immersion schools partner, and some of our other schools partner with a school. They visit the school, they have a host family, they attend classes, but no money is being exchanged. They're just visiting and they have a partnership. We need a memorandum of understanding, which is a written formal document ensuring that we all know each other's roles and responsibilities. We've had occasions last year that a school goes and something went wrong and they didn't have a host family set up, or their housing for the teachers was subpar. So those are not situations I want teachers to be in once they're in that country. I want those things to be considered, ironed out, clarified before you go on your trip, where the teachers are staying, what the teachers' responsibilities are. If there's a host family, what happens if a host family backs up? Do you have backup host families? So I want to make sure we have something in writing. The link that is there is a template. I can't really write a memorandum of understanding for every trip because every partnership is going to be different. So this is something that you, your principal, the school's leadership, and that school's contact need to work on creating together. And then we'll have our legal team look over it to make sure we've, kind of looked at everything carefully. So that's the memorandum of understanding. If you're not partnering with an organization or school, you do not need this paperwork. You would just need a contract if you're using something like World Strides or EF Tours. The other one, something some of you already do, I'm requiring for everyone to enroll in the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program through the Travel Advisory in the U.S. State Department, because this allows you to register your trip to the local U.S. embassy in your country. That embassy, through this enrollment, will receive your contact information as a trip leader, your itinerary, your information, so that if something happens while you're in that country, they can find you and get you to safety. And it'll also facilitate contact between the United States as well. So this is very an important step for safety. The other one is to make sure there's at least one emergency or first responder trained. That will be a CMS employee. It could be a staff member, it could be the trip leader. And there's information on how to train you. Is a self-paced Canvas course. Then there's a Mr. Diebolt who will come and give you a training as well, and first aid kit to take on your trip that you will need. The other one is a chaperone agreement form. I want to make sure that every chaperone you choose, whether it be a CMS parent or a CMS staff member, is clearly understanding their role when they go with you on a trip. I've had situations where chaperones want to extend their trip, and stay longer, and they don't go back with the group. We can't have that happening. For the safety, they have to be reminded that their role is to support and be there with the kids as if they were in a school building. So the chaperone agreement form is to protect and support you, to make sure your chaperones follow all the criteria and they clearly understand before they sign up what their responsibility is on this trip. Every adult going on the trip, including the trip leader, is to sign in and turn in the chaperone agreement form. The next one, would you please repeat? Let's see, hold on. Let me look at quick. Regarding the State Department, yes. So that's the STEP program, the enrollment in the STEP program. It allows you to register your trip with the embassy, which means that if something were to happen while you're on the trip, the embassy can find and protect you and support you and your students if something catastrophic were to happen. So it's just an extra layer of safety. The other one is a travel consent form for a minor. This one is mainly because human trafficking is really, really an issue. And my fear is that a trip leader at any moment could be asked, why are you with these minors and where are these parents and how do we know you have permission to have these children? So this document is for parents to take to a notary and fill out to give to you before you go on a trip so that you have documentations that you would carry with you on your trip so that if anyone were to stop and ask you if you have permission from the parents, you have a notarized document stating that you do. I don't know if you'll ever need it, but if you do, I want you to be prepared to have that. The last is to complete a survey. Like I said, I'm a big advocate for this, and I want these trips to always continue. But for right now, if anyone in our cabinet or school board were to ask me, Christina, how do we know that these trips are supporting our students and families and are making an impact? I don't have anything to show for it. So these surveys are going to be key in helping me show them, yes, they are impactful. Let me show you how. Yes, we might have had some things go wrong, but we've rectified it. These are what we've done to support our families because they've let us know in a survey, and we have a great communication with our families. So I do ask that within 3 months of returning from the trip, that you share the survey with the parents and with the students. It's 2 different surveys so that we can really gauge how these went. They are up and ready to go now. Yes, there are live surveys. So you've just returned. So that would be great. If you could go ahead and do it now, if you've just returned from a trip, that would be wonderful. So yes, please go ahead and share it. And then what I'll do, they're my surveys, is once I get the results and all the results are in, or at least as many as we think will be in, I will share that with you and your principal so that you can see. I've already gotten a trip who has done this, and it was incredible to read what the parents and students said about the incredible impact. Would you share the survey link? It's right here in this bit.ly. So if you go to the chat, the bit.ly in the chat, if you click on here, the survey should be live. If you cannot click on the survey, it's not opening up for you, just let me know, okay? But the links are all within this presentation. The last thing is the addendum to the Code of Conduct. The reason why it's an addendum is because the Code of Conduct online does not talk about international travel. So I took the wording from our policy and I placed it in that template so that when the parents and the students sign the Code of Conduct, they can see how it clearly states if a student misbehaves in a trip, it is not the trip leader's responsibility to bring them back home or pay for anything. It is on the parent and the families to take on that responsibility. I felt it was very important that parents saw that when they signed the Code of Conduct. So that's the only reason why I made that addition. I put it in our, okay, perfect. Thank you. And then, of course, here are also the links to the guide and the checklist. And then everything, this bit.ly, the IFT folder bit.ly, everything is in there as well, okay? So all these spots, you can find all these links. So folder or my presentation, 2 different bit.lys. I When I first joined, I realized how hard it was to find the forms. I was like, if I'm having a hard time as the global studies specialist to find these forms, how are the teachers finding them? You guys are amazing. Like, I think you all work together to find these forms, but you shouldn't have to do that. So I have created a folder with editable forms for every trip leader to have, to use, to start from, so that you do not have to go hunting down for anything. I do have the forms in a PDF form, just so that if you want to look at the forms, I wanted to give you an access to see what it looks like. But when you have the orientation with me, I will give you a folder that you will have editing rights to, that you can complete all the forms in one place. And within the forms are links, supports, everything you need to streamline the process. The forms are new. I made them over the summer. If you see something that needs to be fixed or edited, please email me. I'm a team of one, so there might be human error in these forms. But I have reviewed them carefully. There's a naming convention so that I can keep up with whose trip is whose, with your Ed Journey number, the country, the month and year you're planning to travel, and the trip leader's name. And then that will give us an opportunity to easily share the forms with your performance area and your principal. I don't want for any moment for anyone to say, well, we didn't see this, so we didn't know. Well, everybody has access to it together in a folder, and we can all work together to support you in preparing your documentation. Once the the superintendent works and looks over it and approves it, they can ask you questions, and any edits that you make to your folder, let's say they ask you to clarify something about your itinerary. Once those edits are made, it's just a quick email saying, my edits have been made, look in my folder, everything is ready to go. And that way, a lot of things are getting lost in email. And a lot of people are like, oh, I didn't scan it in. I didn't get I don't have the old version. Now that we have a digital folder, I think it will be a lot easier for everyone to access the most, real-time information. So I'm hoping that will help us, because remember, parents can't sign up and pay for these trips, for approved trips, until they are approved. So the longer the process takes for approval, the less time the parents will have to make deposits for this trip, which will make the deposits larger. So I'm really trying to streamline this so that it doesn't take as long. CMS able to cancel approved trips? Yes, they are. CMS is able to cancel an approved trip. The way they cancel the trip, and I don't know if I have this, I don't have this in this presentation, but you'll see it in our folder, is we monitor the travel advisory, and there are 4 levels. And levels 1 to 2 is either regular caution or extra caution is recommended. You can travel. But if your trip and the country that you're going to moves to a level 3 or a level 4, we cancel the trip because it means that something has occurred in that country to make it no longer safe. Something is unstable, either in the government or terrorism or something happening. So we can cancel the trip at any moment. And we encourage you to share all that with parents before your trip. Even if you use EF Tours or World Strides or another organization like that, they follow the same guidance. So I strongly recommend that you look at the cancellation policy when you're working with an organization to buy and purchase tickets. Anything in the forms that are in red, that is a place for you to fill it in. So please change the red font to black. I only made it red for you. And if you forget to change it, it's not a big deal, but I only made it in red so that you as a teacher or trip leader can easily see what section your performance area is expecting you to fill in. There have been so many times that a trip got delayed weeks because the teacher didn't put a date in the right spot and it delayed us. And I don't want that to happen again because you guys have so many things you're doing and on your plate. So that red just is an indication. Please fill this out because the performance area community is going to ask for that. So that's why that's in red. We will still have to scan signed documents. Parents are going to be signing things. Organizations and schools you work with are going to be signing things. families, parents, principals, and you as a trip leader have documents to sign. This page shows you which forms you sign, which ones are principals and which ones are families. You can scan it through your copy machine at work, or you can scan it with your phone. If you don't know how to do that, I put the directions on that here. So when you meet with me, I'm going to give you a folder with all the templates for you to edit. And I'm also going to have a folder that's called Master. The editable folder is for you to work in and make your own. Once your documents are ready, signed, and finished, you will scan or move them to the master folder. And the master folder is what we'll be sharing with your performance area and the superintendent designee to look at, so that it gives you a chance. If something happens at the last minute and they ask for more, you can easily go on to that master folder, fix it, and they can access it at any time, especially while you're on your trip. If something happens while you're on your trip, when you guys are on a trip, I monitor the travel advisory every single day, and I keep my phone on so that if something were to happen while you're on that trip, you can access to me at any time. It's meant for you to reach out to your principal. That's what the guide says. But you and I both know you might call your principal and they might not be available. I want to make sure that if something were to happen, you can also reach me, and I have access to all the emergency contacts in that folder so that I can support you while you're on your trip. So I do ask that you keep that folder as updated with every information as you can so that I can help you if the day, hopefully not, but if the day comes that you need it, I'm there for you. The other thing I created is additional resources. It is a lot to prepare for a trip. You have to meet with parents. You have to prepare your students. You have to meet with the chaperones that are going with you. It's a lot of work. So I created resources for you to have at your fingertips if you're wanting to use something that some of you already have this down pat and you have your own system and it's great. But if you don't, I have, especially here, I'll highlight, of course, we have a checklist I made that's printable that you can either check or digital that you can check. It's a lot to keep up with. And the guide is like 25 pages long. So that checklist is for you just to have if you want. All these are, it's up to you. Supplemental slides for families. Those include all the information about cancellation so that when you meet with the families, that's already in a slide deck. The slide decks are for you to make your own. I just wanted to get you started. We have student orientation slides to give kids scenarios about safety, about everything they need to know and consider before they go on the trip. And the same thing for chaperones. I encourage you to look at those. They have really some good scenarios I put in there so that you can have these conversations, important conversations before you go on the trip. We want to be ready for everything and anything. And these slides, I hope, will help you. But again, they're just shells, supplemental. If you have your own thing, that's perfectly fine. You are not required to use this. This is just a resource. And you have a few more things here too. Parent surveys are there. I also have a checklist for the principal, what he or she should be doing before the trip, during the trip, and after the trip. If there is something on this checklist that I have forgotten, please email me and I can add it to the checklist. That I want a principal, they have a million things to keep up with too, that they can support you and make sure they're doing their due diligence to support you for this trip, because this is a matter of safety for students. Has non-approved CMS trip paperwork changed? Just a hair, but not a lot. We'll get to that in just a moment. Good question. And then, of course, there are some links for the parents too that you can share with them if you have a parent night. Now the private trips. Before I move on to private, do you have any questions about the CMS approved trips? Do we have access to additional resources now? Yes, you do. The additional resources are within the International Field Trip Guide. Let me show you what that looks like. Okay. If you go on this slide, or if you go onto that bit.ly IFT folder, you're going to see the guide. Okay. I made the guide digital so that I can make edits as needed. And so that it's a little easier for you to find things. So you're going to notice that all the table of contents is hyperlinked so that if you're wanting to get to a specific portion of our guide, it's a little bit easier to find. The additional resources are right here. You click on them and it's going to take you to all the links that I just shared with you now. So everything that I'm sharing today is in this 24-25 International Field Trip Guide. All right, so private trips. Let me get to that slide. Let me make sure you don't have any questions. Okay. For a private trip, not much has changed. It is an off-campus, on your own time thing. So it could be done during the summer. It could be done when you're off, for example, spring break. It can never be done during the school day. The other thing is there's a little bit about the policy about talking about conflict of interest and your absences. That's on there too, the policy to review. I strongly encourage you as a teacher to read that. I just don't ever want a teacher to be in a situation that they didn't know they couldn't do that on a private trip. So at any time you're taking a private non-CMS approved trip and you have a question, please, please, please call or email me before you do anything, just to make sure that you're protected from anything going against board policy. But the biggest thing I want to highlight, which can be the most, I think, things that teachers tend to not realize is because it is private and it can't, when we say you can't use CMS resources, we mean every resource. You cannot use your CMS email to reach out to parents about the trip. You cannot use your Teams meeting accounts to have meetings about the trip. You definitely cannot meet in your school's media center. You cannot hang flyers in your school, and you can't ask other teachers at schools to advertise it because that is part of CMS property and CMS facility and CMS resources. So what a lot of teachers do, if you're going, let's say, with EF Tours or World Strides, that company will set up a Zoom call and meetings with parents and email. And some teachers use their private emails to contact families so that everything is separate from CMS resources. And I can't emphasize that enough because sometimes teachers genuinely didn't know. And I am not the International Field Trip Police. Okay. I'm not going out and checking everybody. And, my job is to support you and to keep you safe, not to tell you and regulate you, okay? But there are people who come to me and report things to me. They will tell me and take a picture and say, this flyer was in a school and it's a private trip and they're not supposed to be doing that. When that happens, I have no choice but to report it. I usually go to the principal first and the trip leader first to make sure there is not a misunderstanding. But if something happens and it's a private trip and you use CMS resources, then what will happen is that trip will automatically have to become an approved CMS trip, which means you will have to go through all the guidelines. And the biggest one is the no water activities. So if your itinerary included water activities in that private trip, it will have to be removed from your itinerary. I never want that to happen. I don't want teachers to be in that scenario. So I really emphasize this to you. If you have any questions, if you have friends, staff members who are planning a trip, please, before they do anything, have them call me. I never, ever want a teacher to be in a bad situation. I want to protect you from that because you guys taking your kids on a trip is such a huge, wonderful thing that you're doing for kids. And I never want you to be in a situation where you don't feel supported and you're in a situation you didn't know what you did was not the right thing to do. So contact me, okay? This is the list, checklist. It hasn't changed. I changed the wording a little bit for the principals just to make sure they were clear, highlighted a couple things, but everything else is the same. You still have to have your principal sign. This is not approval. Okay, notice this is private trip organization signature, date complete, and the principal just signs that they're aware that this is happening and they know because this is your private time What you do on your time is up to you. What we ask a CMS is that you just let us know that you're doing that. There's also 2 things for you to fill out. One, well, not fill out, but to turn into me, and your performance area is going to want this too, is showing it's D, attach in examples of the trip materials confirming the disclaimer. Okay. So that's going to be, they want to see a flyer that says this is not CMS approved, or maybe a screenshot of how you're using your personal email. Guys, be careful with this, because if you send a screenshot of how you're send a flyer to parents using a CMS email, the performance area is already going to know you used a CMS email, so just be thoughtful when you're sharing the samples. The samples are meant to demonstrate that you're not using CMS resources and that you're advertising it clearly as a non-CMS trip. Yes, you can send this to me and your performance area, both. The superintendent designee does not need this. It's just your performance area and myself are the 2 people who get this information, so that we have documents that this was, sent to us. The other form is the private parent acknowledgement form. This is a form parents acknowledging that we know this is not a CMS trip. We have that on file and documented. And you can do it the same way in a Google folder, share it with us, and we have documentations that parents were made clear that this is not a CMS trip. Make a new email and just for try. Yeah, that's a good idea. You might not want to give them your personal email. You can use Google, like a new email in Google, a private one, so that they don't have your private email. That's a good advice. So if you're worried about them getting your phone number and your email, you just might want to create a new account so that the parents don't have your personal ones. And that's it. Any questions at all about international field trips? We have about 8 minutes left. So the rest of the time I can stop sharing my screen. Does anyone have any questions at all for me? And you can unmute. Thank you all for your great update. You're very welcome. All right. Well, let me stop recording. If you don't have any questions, if you do, unmute, because I'd love to capture a question if you have one in my recording. Okay.
Thank you. It's been really informative.